Thank you. When Neely Goldfein invited me to come to Israel, this is the first time I've been to your country. And the richness of your land, the richness of your culture, the richness of the peoples that stay and live in this land, the contributions that you have, thank you, the contributions that you have in terms of the global environment. I mean, a lot of the innovations, certainly on the digital level with Intel, and just makes a whole lot of impact. So thank you for having me. And it's a real pleasure to be here. Now I feel that I'm very suited to be the spokesperson for global diversity and inclusion, because I started my life being made in Australia. So I was born there in Sydney. Then I was exported to Malaysia, where my parents are from. I spent 14 years growing up there in another multicultural society. You know, lots of Chinese, Malays, and Indians, with the major religion of Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and Hinduism. So I was kind of brought up in that environment. And then I was recalled back to Australia. Obviously, the factory settings need a little bit of tweaking. So I ended up being back in Sydney for the next 30 years. Oh, is that right? Yeah, that's about right. Yeah. So within Sydney, I spent most of my life in various industries, which I'll tell you a little bit about. And then, for some reason, I had the fortune to be exported again to the Middle East. I worked in Qatar Airways for 2 years as their global leadership development specialist, because of the fact that I was brought up in many places and they were looking for someone like that to be able to teach leadership around the world. So, in a way, I got repackaged for the global marketplace, and I'm really thrilled to be here. So that's me in a nutshell. Now, before I jump, I've resided in several places, but I've also done business around the world. And one of the fortunes I've had is I've also been diverse in my industries that I worked in. I started life in the military, in the Royal Australian Air Force, who gave me a scholarship to do dentistry. So I'm a dental surgeon. But I'm off duty, don't worry. I will not be fixing your teeth. But keep smiling, looking great. Okay. Then from dentistry, where I actually loved working with people who were anxious. How many of you love going to the dentist? Raise your hand. Oh, come on, don't be shy. We're not that harmful. We relieve you of your pain. We don't cause pain. You cause the pain yourself. We have to fix it. So in dentistry, I learned to deal with people under stress, which gave me a whole new interest in psychology and dealing with people with phobia and anxieties. So now you're getting to picture from a kind of more a technician, I became more interested in the human condition. And then I decided to take a sabbatical to have 2 beautiful children. And when I first fell pregnant, this was another thing. I studied for dentistry, I can do courses in Air Force, but nobody gives you a book or a course to do Parenting 101. How many of you felt totally ready to be a parent? Put your hand up, totally ready. How many of you felt like you were a new manager? You've always been a great technical expert, and suddenly somebody gave you a new job and you have to manage husband and kids. Difficult, huh? Yes, yes. Okay, I didn't see any men putting their hands up. Rami, you're kind of our representative and a few others. And the interesting thing I found was the Jewish women or the Israeli women that I've met are amazing super women. They not only have careers, they're great mothers, they mother their husbands as well, and they probably deal with the politics of the in-laws as well, correct? So by the time you become a parent, you really have had a leadership development program, right? And I didn't realize that was true until I wrote a book called Intentional Parenting, not because I was a great parent. I was writing to people about how difficult it is to be a parent. And I realized that being a parent was the best leadership development journey not because you learn all the processes on the job, about when to feed, how to discipline, how to engage your husband in the process, but it was really about learning from your team, your kids. Just like in teams now, often we look at the millennials and say, what do they know? I'm the leader, I should know what to do. I'm the manager, they should listen to me. Well, if you listen to them a little bit, as Nurit was talking about, amazing ideas can come from different places. And the book Intentional Parenting became a book for business on Amazon. And I suddenly woke up to the fact that I'm not just a mother at home and I'm just a career woman. There is an integration of inclusion. And I'm so pleased to hear, like Intel, Yaniv, the CEO, talks about the fact that there's bonding leave, not maternity leave, not paternal leave, it's bonding leave, which actually gives a whole new language to what inclusion is about, which I think you guys have really set the standards of looking at that. So I'm realizing now the work that I thought was separate for the public to use is now becoming more inclusive, and we can actually learn how to collaborate through that. So that's me in a nutshell, and I thought I'm totally qualified to talk about this on a global stage. So I'm going to ask you to turn to someone that is a little bit diverse from you, someone that you don't know, to get to know them, and ask them the question, in the world of diversity and inclusion, what challenges are you experiencing? And how are they impacting your business? So can you just turn to someone, not someone you would sit next to because you know them, but someone diverse, include them in the conversation. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. No, you're not going to talk to your partner. Nili. Okay, come on. I'm waiting. Talking to your phones is not allowed. You need to talk to a human person. You have 1 more minute.
יש פה הפעלה של הקהל.
Okay, please start finishing up and thank your partner. Please thank your partner. Okay. Please thank your partners and come back to the room. Okay, it's hard to stop women talking. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate that this is a very hot topic. And in starting this conversation, I hope you can take this conversation into lunch later on. Okay, okay. Now, we won't have much time to share because we are on a time schedule. So I bet some of the conversations that you've had might have something to do with some of these things. And our challenges in diversity and inclusion in the world really is about balancing our 4G future. And our 4G future isn't something in the future, it's already happening now. And I'm going to go through each of them a little bit, and you'll probably see the resonance of how this is happening in Israel as well. So global inclusion, when you think of global inclusion, what do you think of? What do we need to balance? Cultural differences, thank you. So cultural differences, you know, sorry? Time zones, yes. I mean, now we're a global village, you know. I have to talk to you, which is 6 hours behind where I am, and then New York is 12 hours behind me, and yes, time zones. And what else? What else is... Right. Right. So isn't it interesting that whenever we think of someone who is far away from us or not have commonalities with us, they seem to be more idiotic or stupid, right? It's funny, it's a perception. The further you are, you're different. Sorry, Ruth? Stereotypes of cultures. Okay, now one of the things is definitely global inclusion is cultural. And there's no doubt, and you guys probably know all about that. You have a very intercultural place already. So what we are now also looking at global inclusion is also the conversation. Yes? Right, absolutely. And I'll come back to that because managing the individual means also managing yourself, but being present enough so you can accept others. I mean, that's kind of multitasking, and it's diversity, including yourself with everybody else. So we're also now including in our digital world the fact that man has created machines. And there is this threat that maybe in 40 years, 40% of our jobs will be replaced by machines. No, 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 no. And we just get so scared. But one of the things global inclusion is encouraging us to do, which is what your video showed, Rami, was that as we become more comfortable with our machines doing things faster and more accurate, it frees us up to be creative, to be intuitive, to be imaginative, and perhaps to find more meaning in our spiritual self, which no machine can do. Well, not yet anyway. Hope they don't. So, and this is a very spiritual land. One of the things that we're finding that, for instance, you still have a strong spiritual heritage. Same in Malaysia. I mean, the fact that both countries don't talk at the government level, I mean, doesn't stop us from talking, which is why I'm here. But China, which is a big economic power right now, when Mao Zedong came down and kind of killed faith in the country, there's no spiritual worship, and a lot of history was burnt. And right now, one of the challenges we have is if China becomes this big economic superpower, is there a danger that they will actually become robotic and treat us no longer as humans? So just be aware that some of the things we're battling at the global level is also to balance humanity and AI. So not to scare you, but this is the balance. And then the next thing is generational integration. The fact is, how many of you, as was said, the closer you are in age, the more you relate to. So people tend to cluster in generations and say, those millennials, they are so disloyal. They are just only focused on themselves. They jump from job to job, not like when I was going through my job. I mean, the fact that these two, Rami and Nili, have had their company together, co-founded for 24 years, nobody does that anymore. But they go from job to job. Now, the problem is, that's probably your perspective looking at the millennials. What are the millennials looking at you? Dinosaurs. You're so slow. You're not up to the speed. I don't just talk to my neighbor. I tweet to my followers. I have a global outset. I actually like the planet. You're just so foveal. You look at yourself and your family. How about being loyal to the planet? So we actually get accused. So in balancing the two, I think we can learn from technology and the young, but we can also look at traditions and not throw them out. Like I said, the danger that China's traditions have been thrown out. The diaspora of Chinese like myself probably know more about some of the traditions than they are. So when I first landed in Shanghai about 10 years ago to do some work, I didn't feel like I was home. I feel more at home in Israel when I landed 10 days ago. Because, I mean, I joked yesterday that Chinese are probably the 13th tribe out of Israel because we've got so much similarity with family and strong women and needing food. But I feel much more at home here. So the generational equation, if you're reading a book called Future Workplace in 2020, written by Jean Meister. Anybody familiar with that book? Interesting reading, because it really talks about how can we integrate generations, because in 2020 there will be 5 generations at work. Traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z. Okay, and Gen Alpha are the babies right now. I actually saw a baby in a dental surgery one day, crawled up to a magazine, and this is what it did. And was absolutely surprised when nothing happened. They're born in the digital age. They expect the magazine to act like a tablet. And this is the kind of workplace where there's going to be misunderstandings. So the other thing is Gen Ys are going to make up 50% of the population, which therefore means that a lot of them will be managers as well. So how do you interact and integrate? And that's why I love this conversation you're having with the fact that you're giving bonding leave to parents. Because if parents start role modeling a good connection with their children, I think this bonding at work could also become the norm. Something to think about. Gender intelligence, well, let it not be said, I think that's quite obvious. The fact that male and female energy is what creates babies, right? You can't do it on your own. So if you want some creativity, you need the male and feminine power. And there is in every man the inner woman, and in every woman there is an inner man. I was really fortunate to be born to a family of 4 girls, which means that my mother and father had to treat us all like boys and girls, because if you just treat us like girls, we're not going to be successful. We've got no brothers for role models. So I actually have a good balance of male and feminine energy. So when I need structure and being able to be focused, and I need direction, I need to defend my idea, I put on my male energy, okay? And, but I need to balance it. So when I need to be nurturing and empathetic and collaborative and creative, I need to bring on more of my feminine energy. And before I was a mother, I had less of that feminine energy. So actually being motherhood allowed me to do that. So there is this dance between masculine and feminine, and I must thank the NGG team for giving me a beautiful gift today that has a little infinity symbol. But to me, it's a reminder of balancing the polarity between masculine and feminine. We had a talk yesterday from the author of Shakti Leadership, a woman called Nilima Bhatt, whose idea of embracing masculine and feminine power in the business world will balance this hyper-masculinity where it's all about, protecting and not actually be as collaborative as we can. So let's bring up more of our men to be more their feminine side, and also for us to step up when we need to. So that's the dance between polarities. The last but not least is the generosity to incorporate that into your work. Now, how many of you now know that CSR is a big thing? We have to do good for the community. But a lot of times when the revenue drops, one of the first programs to drop is community-type stewardship. So there are a lot of companies now that we're working with. For instance, there's a company we're working with called Best Doctors. And Best Doctors is a referral system that started in the United States, is now in Canada, Australia, and pretty much in about 5 to 10 countries in the Western world and coming into the East. And Best Doctors was actually established because it was very expensive in the West to have a second opinion with a specialist. Each time you saw a specialist, it was $600. So if you had a brain tumor and you're not sure, you have to spend another $600 for a second opinion. So Best Doctors is a company that actually can create your employer to spend $1 per employee to have an insurance system such that when any of the employees that are subscribed by the organization has a medical condition that needs a second opinion, they pay nothing to Best Doctors, and there's a network of doctors that basically does it as part of their service. So the more successful Best Doctors is, and they are, the more profitable they are, the more they are doing good. So this is the kind of thing that is actually diversity and inclusion. Don't separate your profit balance sheet from actually what you're doing in the world. Can you make them integrated? So that's where we are, and that's the outside world that's all kind of happening. We've had that discussion at length. And one of the key diversities I want to actually invite you to think about, because I'll give you an example. Singapore. How many of you have been to Singapore? Okay, not too many. Singapore is an interesting city. If you haven't been, Singapore is famous for what? Growth, finance, processes, quite a masculine kind of environment. But Singapore also knows if it continues to grow and stay the same way, it will be superseded by fintech, right? So one of the things that, and they're not good at innovation. Singapore is very good at following processes. You've been to Singapore, it's clinical. Nobody runs late, and everybody can only have 2 babies. And in fact, a lot of couples are match made through a government website so that they can actually produce the most intelligent people in the world. But it's all really quite clinical. So one of the things they've done is actually they've now invited someone who is from India to join their ministry team of innovation because they wanted some diversity from another culture to bring in that. They've now, through that Ministry of Innovation, brought in a big icon of the old financial institution and a retired woman, again, that's the diversity, to talk about why we need to go into the new age. I mean, she's an icon and she's starting to tweet. She's trying to do social media to talk about this new Ministry of Innovation. Then instead of just actually getting bureaucrats to talk about politics at these big things about seeding funds for entrepreneurs, they're actually attracting other sponsors to speak and, in fact, bloggers to talk at these things. And so they're reinventing themselves. So what we're saying is that Singapore looked inside themselves and see what they were good at, but what they're not good at in the future, and did something about it. So one of the things you need to think about is the diversity isn't on the outside. One of the key things that we're finding is in this kind of more global inclusion of looking at the big outside world, you need to start looking at just yourself. Because I wrote a piece in a white paper in this book called Emerging Trends in Leadership and Strategy, where we talk about the mindset on the outside, but the global mindset today is not about the outside world being East is different from the West, It's not about gender, just generational. It's about how to thrive in hyperdrive inside yourself. Do you know how to cope with the change that's happening? And each one of us is different. Each one of us is unique. So the last frontier is not that 4G world out there in outer space. The last frontier, it is the voyage into inner space. It is voyaging into yourself. When was the last time you actually asked yourself, what do I stand for? Or am I just kind of going along with what the company wants? Or what the traditions expect me as a mother or a father or a daughter? So what is it that you need to do in the inner space? And I actually I found a blog where someone asked, okay, name the top 10 things that you love. And they found that who has actually put themselves on the list of top 10? Nobody. Nobody. You always think about your dog, your mother, your plant, but nobody puts themselves in the top 10. You don't even know you. You don't even love yourself. So I'm not saying love in a woo-woo ha-ha way, but in diversity and inclusion, when have you included yourself for the starters? So one of the books that I am totally recommend you to maybe think about is a best-selling book by a Harvard professor. Professor Erica Ariel Fox is a professor of negotiations, and she has a practice of helping leaders win from within. When have you not brought out the part of yourself that you have discluded because you didn't like it or it wasn't rewarded? That's an interesting thing. She's also a student. She's brought up on the Jewish traditions. She loves the wisdom traditions. She's studied religions around the world. She's also looked at psychology. And she's looked at the Jungian archetypes. Now, in this Winning from Within, she's smart enough to break it down to 7 archetypes, of which I'm going to ask you to look at these archetypes yourself and notice which one it is that you are strong in, because I'm going to show 4 first. Which are the 4 archetypes where you're strong in? Usually use that in business. And what is it that is your stretch corner? Usually gets locked away in the dungeon. Haven't even given light of day for this archetype. So the Global Mindset 2.0 is this diversity and inclusion of, say, the beginning of some of these archetypes that you might have locked up forever, never to see the light. So the big 4, let me start with the big 4. And you will recognize some of this in yourself, especially when you were a child. They were in full blown, but when we grow up, they tend to get faded away. Now, the first one is the dreamer. The second one is the warrior. And the third one is thinker. And the fourth one is lover. Okay, if I was to say dreamer, what do you think of? Sorry? Pioneer, forward. You don't live in this world. The dreamer mentally time travels into the future and hope it is different. And who does that very well? Kids, your inner child. If you can bring your inner child to work, the dreamer works, okay? Warrior. The mom, okay? This is the Jewish mom we're talking about, right? Really protective. Okay, if you see yourself, that's fine. That's an archetype where we protect and we will fight for things. Okay. It's also the warrior. So a lot of times, if you actually look at that, if you think of management level, the warrior is probably the COO, someone in operations, whereas the dreamer could be the CEO, right? Now the thinker. Sorry? CTO, yes, CTO, very good. Or even CFO, looking at the details. The lover. HR, absolutely, and there's plenty in the room. Why don't my COO and CTO and CFO understand I need budget to do this for the people? So that's right, and that's how we actually look at it and think about it. Most of organizations currently, where are they strongest at? Warrior. We're going to fight competition. We're going to kill the competition, right? And what else? What's the second one that's usually quite strong in organizations? thinker. But who has got locked in the dungeon? The dreamer and the lover. So I'm going to ask you to, how can you become more inclusive? How can HR actually fight the fight? Talk the talk of the warrior. Include the warrior in the conversation when you're fighting for budget for HR. Don't just be lover. Bring out some of the things that you haven't used in your archetypes in your department. So that's one area. And so what Ariel Fox Erica says is the hardest negotiation is not from the outside, it's you fighting with yourself. Okay, now I'm almost to the end of my talk, but I'm just going to very quickly talk about the last 3 archetypes, because this is where, if you know your 4 diversity, you've got 4 people in yourself that sometimes you've only used 1 or 2. Transformers are when you can actually think about being able to manage these 4 archetypes in yourself. So for instance, let me say the lookout. If you are on a ship, what does the lookout do? It looks out for danger, right? So it looks out for information. Now, the difference between you being on a boat is the lookout is actually looking in to see what the 4 archetypes are doing. What are they? Who are you using? So if you can actually be present in the moment and not think about your budget or think about, some past mistakes, if you stay present, your lookout can look in to see which one you might be able to deploy in actually talking about who to bring up to be part of the inclusion and collaboration. So the captain of your ship, your travels, is the captain who is looking outside for situations that's beyond your control. So the lookout sees what's happening inside you, and the captain looks out for situations that are changing, situational awareness, right? So as the captain, you can now say, okay, dreamers, step up. We need a bit of dreaming right now, okay? You two shut up, right? So this is how you have to become more aware. And yesterday we were talking a lot more about mindfulness practice. In other words, stopping away from what you're doing in your work, maybe taking 2 minutes to even breathe deeply and notice which archetype am I sending into the meeting. And in this meeting, the captain should be aware of what's changing so that we can bring out a new archetype. Maybe we need the warrior today, or maybe we need the lover to get more collaboration. And the last but not least is the voyager. The voyager is very important. The voyager is someone who actually has understood your past history. Your country has got such a rich history. But not to get stuck in the narrative, but to be able to mentally time travel into the future of how I can change, learn from my history, but make the changes today. So the voyager is the chart of records of how you have been and where you want to go, and gives you the inspiration to do that. Now imagine being coached to actually find your 7 big 4 and your 3 transformers to be able to help them collaborate, be inclusive and diverse. And that's what I'm encouraging you in diversity and inclusion, to include this, because in order to actually move forward, you need to become more centered in your inner space voyage. If not, the VUCA world will throw you about. If not, the 4Gs will kind of come in and sabotage what you're doing. So you need to find your balance by being able to be diverse and inclusive. So this is the last question I'd like to leave you with. Because you guys talk too much, I won't be able to silence you. You can reflect on this question. In our 4G world of diversity and inclusion, how are you winning from within? How are you using the big 4 as you confront gender issues, generational issues, global issues, generosity issues? So one last quote, and I thought I'll bring in, usually when I look up quotes, there's always a man. So I decided to use a woman, Anais Nin, as an author. How many of you know her work? Okay. So Anais Nin says that she's an author and essayist that has been observing the global culture, and she lives actually in America, but she's come from a variety of backgrounds. Our culture made a virtue of living only as extroverts. We live for the outside world. We live for outer stimulation. We discourage that inner journey. which your country, your nation is famous for, that spiritual journey. The quest for a center. So we lost our center and have to find it again. So as part of your diversity and inclusion project, I'm going to invite you to start looking at yourself, and as HR, how can you find each willing individual in your organization to support this winning from within so that your organization can be more inclusive from the inside out. So thank you very much.